Great. So I'm glad you all could join me. Everyone who's here to catch my talk. Uh, I really wanted to take the opportunity today to talk about yeah, holistic professional development and um, how essentially how you want to develop yourself as game development professionals in the future. That's why you're all at Guildhall. That's why I went to Guildhall. And my goal with this talk is really to give you the give you the tips and experience. Um, sorry, give you the tips and kind of give you the information about things that you don't even know to ask yet. Essentially, what you don't know, you don't know. There are certain things that you can only gain through experience, but at least in this case, I'm hoping to pose some information to you that will give you a solid direction and allow you to ask your own questions as you move forward and develop your careers. Just to ask right quick, can everyone see my screen? Can everyone see the presentation?
All good on my end.
Okay, good deal. So a brief introduction. My name is Zach Stambaugh, rhymes with Rambo. I graduated SMU cohort 19 in 2014. I'm currently a lead artist at PeopleFun, where I've shipped 12 mobile titles over the course of a 6-year career in game development, an overall 11-year career in software development, and it's been great. I really appreciate both the professional aspects of my career and also the social aspects. Like PeopleFun feels like family to me, and I appreciate the opportunity. Just some personal elements, like I grew up overseas in the Middle East and in France and Indonesia, and that was a wonderful opportunity in and of itself. I really love hot sauce. Right now I'm working on a hot sauce that's 550,000 Scoville for anyone else who knows hot sauce or heat units. And I really love filmmaking too. I just rewatched Jaws recently and Back to the Future, and I just really get jazzed about cinematography and visual storytelling, which obviously probably contributed to my career as a professional artist. So at a high level, just to touch on the topics I want to talk about today, I think it's important that we talk about self-critiquing your portfolio. You're going to do a whole host of things at Guildhall as they make sure that you have the necessary skills to have a job in the industry. And we're going to touch on how you then take that breadth of generally focus it into an effective portfolio. Beyond that, we're going to talk about tips for growing your network and the importance of growing your network and talking to other people in the industry. And then also, I want to give you a complete picture of the interview process. My role at PeopleFun, as a part of my role at PeopleFun, I interview everyone who walks through the door, certainly everyone who is in the art department. So using that experience, I really want to talk about the soft skills that we really look for whenever we're interviewing people, along with the hard skills, which is your portfolio itself. And then also touch on compensation too, which can be a delicate subject because this is a creative field, and it can be hard to put a price tag on our creativity, but we all want to do something. This is our livelihood, and we all want to feel good doing what we're doing. So yeah, I think it's valuable to touch on that realm. So first and importantly, I want you to remember that small steps amount to big change. It's all about incremental work. Don't try and throw your whole portfolio together in one day. Don't try to throw together your whole CV on LinkedIn in one day. Coming back and doing it incrementally will give you a fresh perspective on what you've been working on. Stepping away, getting a breather, coming back to it with the eyes of a third party is really helpful, and it will allow you to slowly craft an effective image of yourself, a professional image of yourself over time. And think of the process as a marathon instead of a sprint. That's a healthy mindset to have, because really, this process never truly ends. We're always growing over time. We're always looking for better opportunities, and you'll be using these skills for the rest of your life. So first up, we're going to be talking about, or I'm going to be talking about, self-critiquing your portfolio. Your portfolio is a snapshot of the job that you want. Like I said before, school gives you these skills. It gives you the technical ability to accomplish things. It shows you how to use tools. It shows you how to interface with people and the methods that the industry uses. And over the course of that educational career, you're going to amass a wide variety of accomplishments as you need to do different things on the different types of teams that you have. Like, I know the demands of your first team game are different from the demands of your second team game versus your capstone. And you'll be fitting into a variety of different roles as you flex your versatility. Not everything you do is going to be relevant whenever you take that step from Guildhall into your professional career. And so you want to keep that in mind as you take all of the things that you have crafted over time and show them to a prospective employer. So first off, the high level question that you can ask that will move you in the right direction is, what kind of studio do you want to work at? There are smaller studios, and they're kind of looking for multi-tool individuals. These smaller studios are studios that are indie developers, or mobile developers, or they just embrace smaller projects. So that's PeopleFun. Even though we're a large company at this point, we have smaller project teams that work within the company. This is Yacht Club Games, who did Shovel Knight, just smaller, like Devolver Digital-esque developers. What they need is what we call a T-shaped developer, and that is someone who has a wide variety of experience, but they have depth in at least one area. So you might be able to engage with game development in conceptualization, and then 3D modeling, and then illustration and marketing and all these different areas. But in one of those areas, you have a real expertise there. Like, you might be also an amazing illustrator. In the case of large studios, these are large studios that we've heard of, like Naughty Dog, Rockstar, and DICE. They're also developer-publisher hybrids, like EA and Activision. Those are publishers, and they also own satellite studios, and so they have these massive teams and massive resources at their disposal, and there's a lot more management that takes place. And they also need specialized developers with these large teams, or they're allowed to get specialized developers because they have these large AAA projects that take many years to accomplish. The accompanying picture here is a bread maker, which I feel like is a perfect illustration of that. It's a machine that only makes bread. Like, that is all you get out of it. You can't even take the bread, put it back in, and make toast. It's all about making like a really good bread, unlike a multi-tool. And so your role at one of these studios can be specific to a particular skill set. Like, you might be only good at 3D modeling, or you might be not only good at, sorry, only used for 3D modeling, or you might only be used for like level design, specifically level design and not world design, or you might only be used for back-end development of like player data and stuff like that, as opposed to seeing the entire project. But they can also be content specific. So in the case of artists, they might only do characters. You will have multiple skills as you create characters, but you will only be responsible for creating the characters in the game. And that is also the same case in the other disciplines as well. So talking about your portfolio website at a high level, the purpose of a portfolio website is to show your work. The examples I'm giving here are ArtStation and Amazon. Like whenever you think about the purposes of those websites, their landing page is that purpose. It is function first and foremost, and then form to carry the function. So on the right, you see ArtStation, which its purpose is to highlight artists in the artist community and show their amazing work and get them to connect with one another and promote that. So their front page is all of the amazing work that you can find there, or the genres of the work that you can find there. Amazon, its purpose is to sell you goods. It's a marketplace. So on the front page, it's all these goods that they think you will be interested in, or categories of goods they're trying to sell to you. It's not, it doesn't have a biography of Jeff Bezos on the front, or it doesn't talk about the things that they've sold other people in the past. It is centric to the consumer. And in this case, the consumer of your portfolio site are going to be prospective employers. It's going to be the individuals who you reach out to, who you want to join the team of. This is just a quick example portfolio. In this case, obviously, it's an artist portfolio, but this can be this. I mean, you can utilize a portfolio like this as a programmer or as a designer as well. It's content centric. It shows the things this person has accomplished first and foremost, and there is very little other noise there. So it makes it very obvious what the user is supposed to engage with, and shows off your abilities as a developer. Content tips. No walls of text, and you really want to have easy to digest examples, and then break out your contributions for team projects. So in the case of walls of text, a lot of us I'm speaking from experience. This was something that I had to learn not to do coming out of Guildhall, and that is, you are really proud of the work that you do and you want to talk about it in length, but as developers of a visual medium, we react to visual examples, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you can give me multiple screenshots and then supplement that with text that explains what's going on in those screenshots, not at length, but just to say this is a character I made, or this is a team game project, the part I worked on was this, then that is super effective. And when you're thinking about how much time you want to spend on this, it also helps you to save time, because you're going to be wanting to work on your portfolio while you also network with people, and you look at what opportunities come up as you're developing yourself and looking for a job. There are lots of providers for portfolio sites. Wix, Squarespace, and Weebly are all out-of-the-box website providers. The great thing is they also work on smartphones out of the box. So you don't have to be a web developer to figure out how all of this stuff is going to look on a phone. Granted, you should optimize for desktop, because whenever you reach out to people, they're going to be looking at your work on a desktop PC at work, most likely. But it's great if they are at lunch or something like that and have a bunch of portfolios to go through. If yours works on mobile and they happen to catch yours on mobile, they're not struggling with the format of the website in order to see your work, because that is what you want to show off, is your work. So as far as content do and don'ts, you definitely want to have quality work over quantity work. A small amount of awesome work absolutely trumps a large amount of crud or non-relevant work. Just think of it in terms of food, really. I mean, if you have a sample platter that has been well curated and is delicious, then you're going to go back to that restaurant in the future. It leaves a good taste in your mouth, pardon the pun. It leaves a good taste in your mouth, and you're willing to go back for more or reach out for more. A large amount of like lukewarm content doesn't allow you to stand out relevant to all of the other people who are competing for the same job. If you have a linear presentation of something, then remember the sandwich approach. And this is, by linear presentation, I mean someone who has an animation reel or someone who has a blog which you scroll down. And that is, you want to have an amazing intro. So like something fascinating up top immediately that they can engage with. That gets them curious. And then they scroll through the core content. And then once again, you save a piece of amazing content for the end. And that entices them to reach out and want to talk to you. So while you're developing your portfolio, something you can do in parallel is grow your network and talk to people. And that comes in handy for a myriad of different reasons. The importance of a network, familiarity, I mean, it's a very small industry. Even people, like I personally know people who have come from California and know people in the industry over there, and moving here, they already knew people here in Dallas who were previously developers in a different state. There's a whole lot of cross pollination, and so it really pays off to be a known quantity as you are talking to people about opportunities, um, and showing that you're a decent person to work with as well. Also, it provides a resource of information. You can have what I'll touch on in a bit, informational interviews with people essentially to gauge what it's like to work at different companies or how they went about honing particular skills that they have, like how they went about growing themselves. And it also, like, last but definitely not least, it's a sense of friendship and community. As you know these people and you all together work in this creative field, the equivalent of writer's block is a very real thing. There will be days when you wake up and you feel especially challenged about what you're trying to engage with. And if you have people who you can talk to in these times, it really helps to kind of emotionally vent with people, and also get their insight on, you know, how you might go about doing certain things. Yeah, it's really important to have that sense of social fiber, especially now when we're dealing with you know, COVID, where we're all in our own homes and don't get to go out and interact as often. Like at PeopleFun specifically, we're having Google Meets where we all hang out together on a Google Meet at the end of a day and socialize, just so we have that sense of like family and camaraderie, and we can all stay sane in a very unusual situation. So meeting people virtually can be kind of hard. Some people gravitate more towards in-person meetings. It feels more organic. Some people gravitate more towards digital. In this case, obviously, we're being forced towards digital. And for those who find it to be more organic to just walk up, introduce themselves, give someone a handshake and stuff like that, they're really having to adjust in this situation. So obviously you want to lean into the resources you have at your disposal. This is LinkedIn, online communities around your particular discipline, and social media. Um, in the case of LinkedIn, you know, you're all there to grow your professional network. So that already gives you a common ground to talk to people around to start off a conversation. In the case of communities, you know, if there are communities around a particular discipline like art or programming or design, then that gives you a common ground, you know? So just feel comfortable in reaching out to people and kind of engaging with the common interests that you know you all have. Just a side note, don't post on people's personal pages with work related stuff. Some people do live the creative mindset 24/7. Like they're very much people who identify with being a game developer 24/7. But if you've friended someone on Facebook, for example, you don't necessarily want to post on their Facebook wall work related questions or whatever. It's in those cases, like you can send a friendly DM, but it's probably best saved for, you know, their work related Instagram or their LinkedIn or something. So how to break the ice. This is just, this is just from experience. I, like anybody, found it, just found I had to navigate a lot of ground before I got to a point where I was comfortable cold contacting people in an effort to get information and grow my network. But I found a formula that really worked and really helped for me was to have a nice intro, find some common ground, build familiarity, and then kind of pitch a non-imposing request for interaction. So, you know, you're essentially saying, hello, my name is insert name here. Hello, my name is Zach. I noticed that you also like filmmaking. Man, that I just watched Back to the Future recently, and the visual storytelling in that movie is out of this world. You know, would you like to get together sometime and talk about storytelling, you know, or films or something like that? You can take a formula like that, and you can transcribe any any topic onto it. So we're talking about it in the context of game development and professional development, but you know, you can use this as you reach out to people for a myriad of different things. A couple of tips: whenever you're talking to people, it helps to be vulnerable and to be sincere. Like people can tell whenever you're just phoning it in. Like, hello, I see that you also like sandwiches. Let's connect. You know, it's just really obvious. So yeah, be sincere with people. These are going to be your peers and friends who you aspire to work with in the future. Um, Also, it helps to talk about what you're up to right now and where you want to go, your aspirations, and they can really relate to that moment of getting their foot in the door or wrestling with something that they don't quite understand. So, whenever you talk to them, explain your situation, be brief. No one wants to open up a DM or a personal message and just have a whole novel to go through. It can be very imposing. But yeah, be sincere with people, and it really helps. So a couple of actual examples that I've used in the past, obviously changed names and a couple of details for the sake of privacy, but these are some openers that I used on LinkedIn whenever I was genuinely interested with the work that peers have done on particular projects. I reached out to a VFX artist on Hearthstone after finding their portfolio and wanting to learn more about particle effects myself, as at the time I was on a project where I was having to learn a lot about that. In the last case, I reached out to someone who went through a specific boot camp that I was interested in, and I was reluctant to spend a certain amount of money on this boot camp. And so I saw an opportunity to connect with someone else in the industry, and also it presented me with the opportunity to ask whether or not they thought that that particular curriculum had any value, and it was a great bonding experience. So informational interviews are also really valuable. Whenever you talk to people, you can pitch a 10 or 15-minute call. Um, I think what I'm differentiating here when I talk about an informational interview is, you know, you pitch the person and just say, hey, I really wanted to get a sense of what this job is like. If you have 10 or 15 minutes over lunch, I'd really appreciate asking you a couple of questions around it. It's different from, it doesn't have to carry the same weight as a social conversation, and lots of people are willing to give you their insight and opinions on their experience. You know, we all love sharing in that regard. Email is okay. Sometimes some people get back to you and say, I'd really rather over email. I'm super busy, or you know, we're in a creative field and some people are more introverted and are just uncomfortable with a call. But conversations, you never know if you don't ask, and conversations carry a whole lot of nuance uh, when it comes to conveying strong feelings about, you know, certain things that you do or do not enjoy about your job on a daily basis, or things about work-life balance, etc. Also, people don't like sharing certain things in text because it can be captured. If you know that there's a record of what you shared with someone about, you know, particularly not favorable experience with a boot camp, they might be reluctant to share that. So, you know, calls are ideal if you can swing it. Um, Also, another benefit, you get a conversation outside of interview mode. Whenever I'm interviewing people about PeopleFun, you know, I love my job and I talk about it very favorably and everything. And whenever someone is talking to me with an informational interview, that conversation isn't so job centric. I can talk about the work-life balance and talk about, you know, personal elements as they pertain to my work. And so you'll get a balanced perspective as you talk to different people outside of just talking to them through the context of an interview. You can also ask delicate questions around compensation. Obviously, you don't want to ask someone, what do you make? Like, what is your salary? Because that is a delicate question. It's very personal. But realistically, you can say, you know, I got on Glassdoor the other day. I'm interested in this particular role, and it shows, Glassdoor shows me that for this role, a compensation range of X and Y is appropriate. What is your experience, or what are your opinions on this? And sometimes people will tell you. I would go so far as to say, oftentimes people will tell you when it's in a general sense like that. Also, you can ask for recommendations, and that helps. That's like the exponential factor of growing your network. Whenever you ask for recommendations, you can ask them, who do they recommend that you talk to? And so that will point you in the direction of more valuable information, more valuable people to connect with. And you can also ask for those connections. You can ask for them to introduce you, or you can ask if, when you reach out to that person, if they don't mind if you name drop. So say, you know, if you're reaching out to someone else at PeopleFun, say, oh, you can cold contact them and say, oh, I spoke to Zach. They recommended I talk to you. And that is more of a foot in the door cold introduction than you would normally get otherwise. You might get a better chance of them responding. And informational interviews, I think the thing that I try and keep in mind whenever I use them is it's your chance to learn and not talk about yourself. Like, granted, you want to ask questions and you're not uh, you're not keeping secrets or anything, but you know, if you only have 10 or 15 minutes for a call, you really want to use that time to ask the questions around the information that you're curious about, and not just have the conversations go off the rails. Just remember that if you don't get a response, that doesn't mean that you failed. Obviously, this image is in jest. You know, failure is learning, failure is growth. You're not going to be successful every time you reach out to someone. Um, Oftentimes, people just have way too much going on in their personal life. They have their own agenda. They're trying to start, you know, a new hobby or something like that that's taking a lot of their time. Sometimes people start LinkedIn or other social media accounts and they just forget about them because they find that they weren't fruitful. So that's to say there are a myriad of different reasons why someone won't get back to you. don't assume it's you. One thing I do recommend you do is speak to a friend or a peer or a professor at the Guildhall and ask and just say, this is how I've been reaching out to people lately. How am I coming across? How would you recommend that I refine my approach? So say you've spoken to a prospective employer and you're ready to start the actual interview process. This, we're now going to go into a section where I'm just going to kind of give you my experience and tips about that interview process. Like I said before, at PeopleFun, do a I've I've done a lot of interviews. Let me put it that way. Now a lot of in-person interviews and a lot of digital interviews, and that's a great process. And from having witnessed a lot of it firsthand, these are kind of my tips and tricks. And well, from a deeper perspective, this is how I see the process and what I think would would be valuable walking into it, your own mindset around it. So first off, there's the preparation, which is extremely valuable. You want to gather your research from Glassdoor. Glassdoor has reviews on employers where people talk about the work experience there. They talk about the compensation range there. They even talk about like what the interview process is. Like there are a handful of companies on there. It might be all companies, but people can submit reviews of the interview process itself and talk about the questions that you commonly experience as you interview somewhere. So it's a very valuable resource. The informational interviews, which I previously mentioned, getting a sense for the social dynamic of a place where you want to work. Guildhall hosts mock interviews. I was a part of one recently, and I think those are incredibly valuable. It allows you to rehearse the questions with peers or advisors to wrap your mind around the technical aspect and make sure you know what you're talking about. The only thing they don't quite simulate is the thing they don't always simulate is the real pressure or anxiety of an interview process. You know, when you're talking to a whole room full of strangers and really hoping to work with them in the future, or you really admire them for the projects that you're familiar with, you know, there can be a certain amount of stress in that case. And it really helps to reach out to people and grow your network beforehand, because that's also a training tool for you to get used to um, cold contacting strangers and talking about yourself at length and what you do. Also, as part of your preparation, know your conditions, know how you want to work. It helps to know if you can or cannot work full-time, part-time, contract, the benefits of each of those situations, and the compensation that you're willing to accept whenever you work at a prospective employer. Um, you know, just to differentiate each of those situations, some people need to work full-time because they have a family, and so they need the benefits that come along with full-time employment. It is a regular salary, and it often comes with benefits like health insurance, which, you know, you can pass along those benefits to your family in that case, and it comes with support. In the case of contract, some people prefer contract because it's periodic. You can choose whether you want to re-engage with employer after a certain job is done. Um, it's temporary, so you get to kind of mix up your projects. Um, you can even, I mean, if you're a really good contractor, you can juggle multiple jobs at once. So yeah, just know what appeals to you and what you're capable of. So as far as the hard skills go, these are all about your trade and your discipline. This is what your portfolio shows. What they can't tell from looking at your portfolio is what is going to be made up for in the interview process with the technical questions around around what you're showing them. And by them, I mean us, I guess. Really, I should speak firsthand. This is whenever I'm seeing someone's portfolio, I am asking questions around why did they, why did you make these certain choices on a project? Explain to me what tools you use to accomplish certain things. However, if you have a well curated portfolio, it really lubricates that process. Like I don't have to ask a lot of these questions. I get to just kind of like know you as a person. So, um, you know, whenever you're honing that image, just know you're doing it to do a lot of upfront work as you reach out to um, the studios you want to work for. The soft skills, the other side of it, that's who you are. And that is equally as important. I can say personally, like whenever I'm gauging someone's hard skills versus soft skills, it's 50-50, but it feels like a very different balance to me. Like I feel like hard skills are super obvious and immediate to me, and I can ask questions if I have like small indicators, but really the interview for me is the opportunity for me to understand what this person is like to interact with on a daily basis. Like, do they listen to what I'm saying? Are they detail oriented? Do we have commonalities in our problem solving approach? If we don't, like, are we complementary in our problem solving approach, which can be better in a lot of situations? Also, I gauge how you take feedback. It's not super common. Like I don't really ask people in an interview. I don't critique people in an interview and say like, oh, I wouldn't have gone with this particular thing. Like I just really enjoy seeing what other people's creative process is and the choices that they make. Oftentimes what I will ask is how or why did you do a particular thing? And I find I get a lot of information that way. You know, if someone if someone technically executes something in a questionable way, and I ask why they went about it that way, they might explain that, oh, this was done because of a deadline that I was trying to make, or this was done because of a technical restriction that I couldn't get around. If given the opportunity, I would like to grow in a particular direction and circumvent that in the future. And that just shows a whole lot of strength. That shows a whole lot of thoughtfulness, and that someone can take constructive criticism very well. So interview etiquette, give the speaker space to ask their full questions. Also clarify uncertainties. Like if I ask you a question and you just make assumptions, and I have to go back and clarify, then, well, I would just like to say, like, I don't want that to be the case. Like if I ask a question and kind of leave a little wiggle room in there, I appreciate the thoughtfulness whenever I'm interviewing someone, that they would come back and say like, well, did you mean X, Y, or Z? Or even better, that they would say, well, I'm not sure if you mean X, Y, or Z, but let's take two different scenarios. Let's take the scenario where we're developing a game with a large budget versus a small budget, or with a large user base versus a small user base, and then walk me through multiple possibilities. And that's incredible. I love it. Whenever I went through Guildhall, they taught us the STAR method. I'm sure they still teach you guys that there. It's a great format. It is situation, task, action, result. And it's essentially a framework about how you can go about answering a question and providing all of the pieces to describe, to essentially mirror what the interviewer is asking you and make sure that you understand the question, to describe a situation in which you encountered that yourself and the task that you were given, the challenge, the action that you took, and the result that came out of that action, and whether that was good or bad, or more appropriately, whether that did or did not work given the particular circumstance. And obviously, you just want this to be a conversation. Like you don't want it to sound like you're reading from a script. I just love it whenever people can come right in and talk to me about their experiences, and I can see that I can gel with this person, that they have initiative and thoughtfulness, and are a well-rounded individual. Also, if you don't know, this is kind of obvious, but I would be remiss if I didn't say this. If you don't know, just be transparent about it and explain your logic to walk the interviewer through an approximated answer for how you would go about solving that. Um, if you had to solve it on the spot without all of the information. This stock photo is terrible. That guy looks like he lost his car keys. All right, so just to talk more about the social element, um, the other half of the interview when I'm talking to someone, I want to see how I can socialize with them. Uh, like I said, this is a creative field. I love coming into work, and whenever we're challenged, whenever we're in the middle of a project and we're really kind of grasping for what we could possibly rope into it that makes sense within the confines of the project, within the particular like IP that we're exploring. It really helps to just be able to talk to my peers and coworkers and share like what we're excited about and kind of like spawn new ideas that way. It also shows that you have initiative. It's great. Like anyone, there are lots of people out there who can just sit down and do a job. It is a whole different tier of individual whenever you can interface with the people around you. Whenever you see a problem, you get up and you have the initiative to find someone and say, hey, I think this is a concern. I just want to make sure that we're going about this the appropriate way, because I think down the road that this could pose challenges for our particular project. Initiative, being a self-starter, that's obviously a great thing, especially if you're working in a small studio, which is where my experience was whenever PeopleFun started. Whenever I first joined that team, that was 8 developers. I was developer number 8. And so I didn't get to just sit down and mindlessly do my job. I had to wear a lot of hats. And one of those was having the initiative, being someone who thought outside of my realm of expertise and really thought holistically at a top level for the sake of the whole project. So now to talk about compensation, which obviously can be a touchy and delicate subject with some people, especially because we're in a creative field and it can be hard for some people to put a price on their creativity, but realistically, we're talking about our livelihood, and no one likes feeling like they're undercompensated or underappreciated for the work that they're trying to find passion in, for the work that they do. So for me, I really think this is all about having the right attitude. Like I said, it can be uncomfortable to talk about, but really practice makes perfect. And that's where those informational interviews I was talking about come in handy. That's where talking to your peers comes in handy. Having those disconnected conversations where you can get a sense of what is or is not appropriate or expected given your aspirations. Also, the right attitude. Negotiations, when it comes to compensations, they're not a duel. It's not the stereotypical scene from a movie where it's 2 businessmen kind of like betting against each other about what, who will go higher or lower with a salary. Really, you should be thinking about it as both sides want to exchange goods, and you're trying to find a win-win situation for both parties, both yourself and the employer. They have compensation that they are willing to offer out for someone who has a particular skill set, and they want to see if you have that skill set, and you want to see if you would be happy working for them. So the components of compensation, by the way, never accept a job from someone who just holds out like a handful of $100 bills. This is just a stock photo. But The components of compensation are salary, which is everyone's heard of. It's your hourly or yearly wage. Benefits, which are your 401k and insurance plan. Amenities and perks, which are like benefits, but they're not necessarily tied directly into that compensation, the benefit flow. So it might be kind of auxiliary things like expense allowances for games, health stipends, um, other investments in employee well-being. So for example, at PeopleFun, we have $1,000 a year expense account that we can spend on anything related to mobile games. And that means mobile game microtransactions, that means games themselves, that means the actual devices that you can play games on. I just bought an iPad Pro recently, and that was great. They also have like yoga in the studio. I have a friend who worked for a studio that gave them a health stipend so that they could get a gym membership, and it was a certain amount every month. And certain companies will also have programs for investing in your well-being, be that classes that expand on your skills. For example, I know Blizzard and certain larger studios have art classes after hours. Um, so yeah, just do your shopping. And in the case of equity, that is company stock and stock options. And you want to clarify which whenever you're talking to a prospective employer, and also understand a vestment schedule, which essentially means that pieces of it become available to you over time. It's not immediately available to you right away. And also just to differentiate, I guess for those who don't know, company stock is a piece of a company that has value if the company has value, but a stock option is the opportunity to acquire those pieces um, in exchange for money. So essentially, you're buying the options to acquire the company's stock. So in terms of tactics, whenever it comes to talking about compensation around, a prospective job that you're applying for, you can ask what the position pays. Some people are cautious around this, and I guess I would recommend that as well. It certainly puts things in your corner if the employer pitches their number first. Sometimes they will ask what your expected salary is, and the kind way that you can return the question to them is just to ask what the position pays. Like what is their budget for an individual in that particular um, position at their studio. Also, I recommend for people who are coming from a job to another job, or otherwise talking about their previous compensation packages, speak in terms of overall compensation. That means all of the four components that I talked about previously: salary, benefits, amenities, and stock. Figure out the value for all of those things and talk from that standpoint. It gives you a higher number whenever you're talking to a new employer. It gives them kind of like a full idea of what you're worth. And also think about the difference in cost of living. If you're moving to a different market, if you're moving from Dallas to California, the cost of living over there is like way higher. So you want to know that you're being compensated in a way that accounts for that change. Also look for win-wins. I mean, like I said, this is a conversation with a prospective employer. So they might have particular challenges or areas that you can be understanding and can accommodate. If you're talking to a small developer, if they've just started, they might say, they're unable to offer you a large salary. And when you talk to them about their challenges, they say like, well, we've only shipped one game, like we don't have a very high revenue stream, we're just unable to pay a large salary. And you might be willing to make a particular accommodation and balance the scales in a different direction, like take more equity in the company instead, or take a particular amenity where you get to work from home 2 days a week or something like that. Just keep in mind that it's all negotiable, and if it's a healthy conversation, then you won't have trouble talking to people openly and honestly, putting all your cards on the table and looking for a win-win. At the end of the day, all that matters when it comes to whether or not this job is right for you is what you think. Are you going to be happy with what they've offered? Um, so yeah, it speaks for itself. So just to summarize, I went over a portfolio showing the work that you want to do. I really recommend honing and showing your technical abilities in such a way that you are showing off what you aspire to do to prospective employers. While you're doing that, growing your network, meeting new people, learning new things, looking for opportunities and genuine connections, and growing your social fiber. And then, we shared some tips with the interview process and my recommendations around the soft and hard skills that you need, being a great listener, and then the aspects of compensation and finding a win-win in that scenario. So that's the end of my talk, and we can move it over to questions, maybe.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zach. Yeah, we will move into our Q&A now. So how this will work is if you have a question, just feel free to raise your hand. And it looks like we already have a question from Cole. Cole, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Yeah, first off, thank you. Awesome presentation. I was really curious about how you go about establishing what the work-life boundaries are in an interview process. Like if you're going to be expected to be on call outside of work or expected to reply to work emails outside of hours, and really understanding the boundaries between your professional life and your private life. I know I'm somebody that absolutely needs to recharge after work and not have that constant stream of notifications. So I'm just wondering how that kind of works out in an interview.
Sure, that's understandable. If I could ask, what discipline or what job are you aspiring to have?
I'm a level designer and hoping to go into like mechanical design and like level scripting as well.
Cool. Okay. So I will say it's kind of disciplinary dependent. There are several variables in this answer. So I just want to kind of like give you a complete picture. Um, Chances are, as a level designer, you are not going to be on call after hours. Really, the only people who are on call that I'm familiar with are people who run live ops, live operations. So they might be responsible for, server infrastructure or something like that. If you run a live game, like a mobile game, and they have tournaments or a leaderboard that runs around the clock, and suddenly that infrastructure goes down, then you are absolutely going to get an after hours call because you're going to need to respond to that. But whenever it comes to someone who is a level designer or an artist, chances are you are working within a managed schedule and you know what your hours of work are. And no one's going to need like a character design after hours, like on the spot in the middle of the night. Having said that, that's where I recommend like doing your research and reaching out to people, establishing a network, and talking to people at the studios where you want to work to get an idea of what the work-life balance is. Because depending on where you work, there might be a culture of crunch or a culture of very much like culture of non-crunch. I can say honestly, that's one of the things that I appreciate about working at PeopleFun. That's one of the reasons why I chose that particular job, is because number one, as a mobile developer, our deadlines are very fluid. We don't have to hit like release windows. It's a live game. It's a game as a service, right? And also the fact that it is a studio that is comprised of a whole lot of people who have families. There is just the obvious like social dynamic where everyone says, our work and health come first and foremost. Like games are not the most important thing. So it really comes down to, like you kind of doing your research and understanding what the culture is at a studio that you're applying at. But great question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Any other questions? All right, looks like we have a question from Manav. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
So I am in the recent cohort, so I just joined PeopleFun. And so since I'm just starting out in the industry, I don't know if there's a particular impetus on me to be networking, or there's a need for me to be networking. So there's two parts to this question, which is, are you supposed to be networking from any point you can? And secondly, if let's say I do get an opportunity to get in contact with some people in the industry, right? But I don't have any particular questions or things to talk about. How do I capitalize on such opportunities? Do I do some research beforehand to just find something to talk about, or what is the way to approach these situations?
So I would recommend that you always network. I mean, the caveat there is you don't just want to reach out to people in an empty fashion and say hello, I should be talking to you. But I mean, what you want to talk about in those scenarios are things that you're curious about when it comes to what it is that you want to do professionally. You can get their insight on things that you have been working on. You can talk about what you are currently doing and where you hope to be in terms of your skill development in the future, and ask about what journey they took along their path to get recommendations. I mean, when it comes to the questions that you should ask, really they're limitless, because it comes down to your own curiosity. It comes down to all the things that you want to know and you don't have the information for currently. So yeah, just to summarize, I absolutely recommend it. Obviously reach out to people in a very sincere way and with questions. And in order to get those questions, just sit with your colleagues for a day and kind of ponder what your future is going to be like. And then whenever you come to a question that you really want to know the answer to, use that as a springboard for an informational interview.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We have another question from Arthur here. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, so sort of piggybacking off of that, do you have any particular recommendations of how to keep a conversation going beyond just, a first set of questions? In the past, when I've sort of worked on networking and the like, I always have questions, things I'd love for people to answer, things I'd love to learn about, but there's sort of a certain number of volleys that can happen before a conversation, at least in my experience, sort of ends up peering out if it's based on those questions. Either I run out or they have other things to do or the like. But do you have any advice on sort of forming connections with people via networking that sort of last a little bit longer than just sort of an exchange of questions once you've got that part down?
That's a great question, and I absolutely understand the situation that you're in. I mean, it's just like any other skill that you develop. It takes practice and experience, and it can feel very painfully awkward sometimes whenever you're not used to talking to these people who work on projects that you one day aspire to work on. It's a very vulnerable and honest position to be in. So first off, the high level recommendation is just do it and practice. I don't want that to sound like too easy of an answer from me, but honestly, that is how you get experience, is by just doing it and failing and reflecting and doing it again until you're good at it. To address with some, I guess, specific advice, when it comes to what I talked about with informational interviews, those are very much 10 or 15-minute conversations where you specifically are asking questions about things that you are curious about. So when you've pitched this call with someone, you're just saying hey, I have a couple of questions around you know, how you went about designing X, Y, and Z on this project, or how you went about, or what your career has been up to this point, because I aspire to the same career. And then before you talk to them, you've thought out your questions beforehand, even if like that's kind of the benefit, I guess, of meeting people over Zoom right now, or of a phone call, is you can have these resources on hand to like read off so you don't forget your questions. Um, and even if you're in person, you can have the questions on your phone. Like if you just say like, hey, I have some questions here I'm really curious about, like I'd like to run through these right quick. If you're honest with people, like that, no one will fault you for that. And just to differentiate, like an informational interview is different from kind of like a social conversation with someone because it has a purpose. So you've prepared your questions beforehand. If you're talking about just networking from a social aspect, like you go to a meetup and you're just meeting people, I mean, that's all about you. You know, you can talk to people, ask them about where they're at in their life, and ask them, you know, questions around like how they got there or what they're interested in or what got them into that. And that's also your chance to like share who you are as a person and just find common ground. So like in your case, what is something that you enjoy doing, Arthur?
I write and participate in live action role playing games. So like taking D&D tabletop games off the table and in person, so you're actually acting as your character.
That's awesome. And I'm, as someone who also plays D&D, like I can say, I'm sure it's probably your case too, like that is what fed into my desire to be a game developer. And that right there, just talking about your passion, that's a great way to connect with someone. So, you know, just think about what is interesting about you and carry a lot of confidence there, and ask other people like what they're interested in, and form a solid connection.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I believe Cole was next. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I was really curious on how, as prospective job seekers, you can go looking for positions at much smaller and indie companies. I'm a big fan of the like small team dynamic between like 15 and 30 people, and how you have those personal connections and everybody kind of touches everything. But in searching for positions, one of the biggest issues I've run into is that those smaller studios don't have nearly as much outreach in looking for positions, and it's much harder to find them because of that. So are there any specific pipelines that you recommend in looking for positions at smaller studios, or is that a matter of like actually reaching out to them on a studio by studio basis and asking if they're looking for anyone?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of answered your own question, but yeah, to talk about it, the onus is on you to secure the job that you want, to do what you want to do. So if you, for example, if you go to an indie studio's web page and they might just have like a couple of pages about their games that they put out. They might have a career page that hasn't been updated since like 2018 or something like that. And it's understandable because they don't have like someone there who is specifically, it's their role to like create the company's web presence. But I would recommend jumping on, like figuring out who the developers are there. Like most games have a credits screen or a screen that says like developed by, and you can take those names, you can punch them into LinkedIn, you can punch them into ArtStation, you can punch them into Google with like, you know, this name designer, this name artist, whatever, and find people that way. And eventually find a point of contact. And then it's just about being kind and being open and saying like, hey, I love the work that you guys do. Like I'm aspiring to do this, to, you know, fill this role. Would you guys be willing to talk to me? And going back to what I said before, like there's a great chance that if they're not updating their webpage, that they're also too busy to get back to you. And that's where like kind persistence is important. like just follow up with them for every, like not too frequently, but maybe every month to month until you hear back from them. Just say like, hey, it's still me, like this is still my work, just to keep you updated. Like I just added this element to my portfolio. I would love to hear from you guys or something like that. Really, the only time that it is not appropriate to keep reaching out to someone is when they specifically tell you to stop, or when you're obviously like just reaching out every day and kind of going overkill. But yeah, I mean, you just have to ask yourself, like, how much do you want to do this thing that you really want to do? Like, how passionate are you? And that will kind of answer your question as to how resourceful you're willing to be.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. All right, looks like Jemiah, you might have our final question for the evening. Feel free to unmute and ask away.
Hi, so I wanted to ask, do you know if there's like any like key questions to ask during an interview to get to know a company's culture?
Companies to know, or questions to ask to know a company's culture. Yes, yeah, you're putting me on the spot, but I can come up with some. I mean, if it was me, I think I would be asking things like, what do you guys like to do for fun around the office? Like, obviously we have the common ground that we're all game developers, and we like games, or we like being creative. And so that is an obvious area where you can talk about commonalities, what games have you played lately or stuff like that. But if you're trying to figure out the culture and the work-life balance, you can ask people what their hobbies are outside of work, or ask them things that you're interested in outside of work. Like, have you been to any interesting movies recently or stuff like that? You can just openly ask about like if the company has any company events, like what they do for their holiday party, or if they, if everyone likes to get together outside of work and do things together. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, good deal.
Awesome. Well, hey, I want to thank everyone who joined us, and especially Zach. I want to thank you so much for your time. And this was just fantastic, and really hits upon so many of the items that is really important for students to hear. And if anyone has any follow-up questions that come across your mind later on, or you didn't get a chance to ask, feel free to just let me know, and I can send them to Zach, or if Zach is accommodating, you can feel free to connect with him directly. And I think that's about it. Thank you so much, Zach. We sincerely appreciate it. This was awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me. And I gotta say, if you want to practice on your LinkedIn connections, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and practice on me. It's absolutely fine.